Good morning, friends. Welcome to our Tuesday Bible study. These last few days leading up to Christmas, and especially Christmas Eve, mean different things for different families. To many, it means parties and family gatherings. It means getting to see old friends, making new ones, seeing relatives that perhaps you only get to see once or twice a year, serving meals at homeless shelters for others, or soup kitchens, children squirming with excitement and anticipation so intense it just feels like electricity's in the air. But that's not how it was for Mary and Joseph on that first Christmas Eve. They got up that morning cold, tired from the journey that they had been making from Nazareth, and set out to finish their trip. Bethlehem was less than a day's journey away, but Joseph knew they'd be lucky to reach it by sunset, with Mary ready to give birth at any time. And Joseph was worried. Mary shouldn't be traveling in her condition, but they had no choice. He must have wondered, why did the Romans have to choose this month for the census? This was Mary's first child. How was he going to find a midwife in Bethlehem? He didn't have any friends there. He didn't know anyone there. This was just bad timing all the way around. Well, he would find him a warm room and make Mary as comfortable as possible. Tomorrow he'd ask around and find a midwife for Mary. Meantime, there was nothing to do but keep walking and worrying. Mary was in agony. She tried not to show it because Joseph worried so much. Every step the donkey took shook her whole body. She ached from head to foot. And the contractions, even though they still were not regular, were made even more excruciating by this bumpy, swaying ride. Cold air didn't help either. And she shared Joseph's concern about a midwife. She had been there to help her cousin Elizabeth with the birth of their only son, John. She knew it would be hard and that Joseph didn't know about these things. Mary hoped they'd be able to find a midwife who would be patient and kind. But there was nothing to do now but try and endure her suffering as quietly as she could and keep her mind focused on how nice a bed in a warm room would feel when they finally got to Bethlehem this evening. They stopped for lunch. Joseph prepared them a frugal meal. He wasn't a good cook like Mary was. So they had a little bread and some cold mutton left over from the last night's meal. Joseph could see that Mary's contractions were stronger now, and she really couldn't hide the pain. So Joseph quickly gathered up the remnants of their meal and got Mary back up on the donkey. He wanted to hurry to try to get to Bethlehem so Mary could get into bed and could get some rest. And so they started off once more, with Joseph leading the donkey and Mary clinging to its back. It was sunset as they finally climbed the last hill and made their way into the city of Bethlehem. But what a shock. They could hardly make their way down that narrow street. It was so crowded. The noise, the smell, the jostling and the pushing, it was almost too much to bear. Joseph saw the sign for the inn and he pushed his way towards the door. The innkeeper was there, leaning in the doorway, laughing and taking a break from all the bustle inside. "I need a room," Joseph called. The innkeeper laughed and said, "I haven't any. We've been full for 3 days now." "But my wife is pregnant," Joseph pleaded, "and the baby could come at any time now." "There's nothing I can do," replied the innkeeper. "I'm at double occupancy now, but you can get some shelter from the wind and the cold out back in the stable. It's not much, but it beats sleeping in the street. I'll send for a midwife. I'm sorry, that's the best I can do." Joseph was overwhelmed. put Mary in a stable with camels, with donkeys, ask her to stay in a place like that? But what else could he do? Heartbroken, he made his way back to where Mary sat on the donkey, her face pale and drawn with the strain of the journey and the painful contractions. Joseph, Mary said, can we go in now? The contractions are getting stronger, and I'm afraid the baby may come soon. I'm sorry, Mary, Joseph said. The inn is overcrowded. We can't get a room. We'll have to make a place in the stable. Mary was crushed. After all she'd been through on this horrible journey, this was the final humiliation. Joseph led the donkey around to the back of the inn and found the stable with no trouble. His nose led the way. What an awful place to have to stay, and with the baby coming. He helped Mary down from the donkey and then set to work. Being a carpenter, Joseph was no stranger to hard labor, and this was a labor of love. He raked out the cave, swept it, brought fresh straw to cover the damp floor, built up the fire in the back, and then cleaned out a feeding trough, which he filled with fresh straw to be ready for the baby. He made Mary a pallet on the straw and then went to the inn to try to get some hot food. Later, as Mary and Joseph ate, Joseph wondered how things had come to this. He remembered the angel's words that this child was the Son of God. And he wondered, would God forgive him for providing such poor circumstances for the birth of Messiah? Joseph had no idea that all these things had to be so that the prophecies for Messiah could be fulfilled. As Joseph cleaned up from the meal, suddenly Mary gasped, "Oh, Joseph, it's time. Help me." Fear, pain, a cry, a baby, a miracle. And the world would never be the same again. Exhausted, yet filled with the wonder and joy of a new mother, Mary leaned her head down over her newborn son, and she kissed the face of God. In a field just outside of town, shepherds who were keeping guard over the flocks of sheep suddenly cast themselves on the ground, their faces buried in their hands in terror, as the angel of the Lord in all his glory suddenly stood before them and proclaimed the birth of Jesus to these men. Then a multitude of the angelic host appeared with him, praising God and proclaiming peace and goodwill to all those whom God favored. As soon as the angel disappeared, they immediately got up. They hurried into town to see this baby whom the angel told them they would find lying in a manger. And 1,000 miles away to the east, 3 magi suddenly saw a new star appear in the sky. And they knew their prayers had been answered. And they immediately began to make all the necessary preparations for a very, very long journey to follow this star, so that they could finally come and pay homage to the King of Kings, whose birth its appearing proclaimed. This is what happened on that first Christmas Eve. This is what we celebrate. And this is why we need to be careful and share with our children and with our grandchildren, so they know the truth, so they never forget, so that right will prevail. And so that when our Lord Jesus returns, he will find faith on earth. Merry Christmas, friends.